Welcome to Rates&Barrels. It is Thursday, July 11th. It's live one. Derek Van Riper, Trevor May, Eno Saris, all here with you on this episode. We'll discuss the demotion of Bobby Miller. What is next for Miller? What kinds of adjustments will he have to make to rejoin the Dodgers rotation at some point in the second half of the season? We celebrate the 10th birthday of Statcast. Happy birthday, Statcast. Hope childhood is going well for you. We'll dig into the tools that we use the most, how it's changed the way we analyze baseball, and look into the future. Talk about some tools that are new or relatively new right now that we will still care about and be even more excited about 10 years down the road. We'll take a look at what happens in extended plate appearances. What is the cost of that on the pitching side? And then we've got our game plan segment. We're going to take a look at Gunnar Henderson. It should be easy to get Gunnar Henderson out. Come on. We could solve this in some fashion. So a lot of ground to cover today. Special shout out to the
also talk about this hat.
Yeah, this is a great hat.
What is going on with this hat? Why is it that color? What is this hat?
Isn't it cool? I love this color. It doesn't really complement my skin tone well, but I thought I would mix in the Expos hat. I've always liked the Expos.
What's the history of this specific hat? Do you know anything about why this hat exists?
No, it's just one of the. It's from that same place where I've got all the kind of the funky hats, the Ace hat and stuff. I just saw it and I was like, that color. That's a 90s electric pastel color for me. I'm in. Let's do it. And I'll never turn down a Montreal.
Like the sailor, like the
little string. What is it? It's called it's like a I don't know what it's like a mariner's you wear boat shoes and you wear hats with this with like an anchor on the front. I actually don't know what the style's called. If anyone knows, let us know.
Dude.
I think it used to have a functional purpose before they made hats strong enough to just stay up. The weight of the crown would start to collapse. I think they used to hold things up a little bit because hats used to be softer on top than they are now, right? They've changed.
Yeah.
Jump shoot.
It moves too. It's not like sewed on. You can move it around. Sometimes it does that and I don't notice, but yeah.
You can put stuff up there. You know, you can
put stuff up there. You could hook things on, pens.
Colgate color.
A Sharpie. Yeah. Colgate color. Yeah, I love that.
Dental hygiene is real, according to Jump Shoot in the Live High. But yes, lots to cover. I thought I had a pretty good hat. I had a Delta Beer Lab hat. It looks like a brewer's hat. It's a little frayed, but it's definitely more in the dad hat category than the cool hat category. So
that's how we wore them.
And I pounced. Yeah,
curved brim. You had to you put like a ball inside the brim, and then you put a rubber band around the ball.
Rubber band it. Yeah. We used to scrape the front of the bill to tear it a little bit. I had a Stanford hat that I did that too, actually, for my whole childhood. So
yeah, I got to fix my hat situation. I'm still wearing hats like it's 2002, so good for me. DVR would be a dad guy. Anya's right. I mean, that's my vibe right now. I do like boat shoes though too, so I have the right shoes to match Trevor's hat. Why are you laughing at me? Boat shoes are great.
All right.
I guess it's a safe place. I can share it.
Yes, they are. They are great. Yes,
they're wonderful.
Yeah. Yes.
Apparently not. Apparently, I'm the only one here wearing boat shoes. All right, let's talk about the Dodgers situation with Bobby Miller. He gets optioned. He's going to do some work with the team's instructors first, and then eventually go to Oklahoma City at AAA to begin the second half. There's not really this set timetable for him to come back to the Dodgers, and the expectations from Miller were really high. Last year, pitched well as a rookie, 3.76 ERA, 110 WHIP, 119 Ks, and 124 in a third innings. I think when you looked at this year's Dodgers rotation, once they acquired Glasnow, signed Yamamoto, it was still, hey, Bobby Miller's the important number 3 starter here, and this could be as good as any Dodgers rotation we've seen in recent years, even though Clayton Kershaw's hurt and it's a bunch of new faces. This year has just not gone well for Miller. He's been hurt. He's dealt with a shoulder injury. ERA is up over 8. The whip is at the 1.83 mark right now. I think people are asking in Discord, hey, is Bobby Miller eligible for your next Hunter Brown episode that you talked about a couple days ago? It's like, yeah, I think this qualifies now because in fantasy leagues, people are going to drop Bobby Miller in redraft leagues. They're not going to wait this out because it might not be a quick sort of turnaround. So the first question here is, what has gone wrong for Bobby Miller? I mean, what do you see that might go beyond the injury that he has dealt with this year?
I think it is just that, but the way it's manifested is not been necessarily in stuff, although he is, has lost about a tick and a half on the fastball. It's actually been the command that's been most affected, and command numbers that are out there, even walk rate or something like location plus, they're just not that meaningful in the samples he's given us this year. 29 innings at the major league levels, 8 in the minors, or 14 in the minors. It's just it's not that you can say he does not have good command. I do think that there's something weird about him, like more like if you step back further and don't just talk about this year, and that is that he has some of the best stuff in the big leagues and has not really performed to that level. And even in the minor leagues had weird ERAs that started with 4 and didn't really dominate the minor leagues as much as you would expect from a guy who like sits 100 and has like a 85-mile-an-hour breaking ball with great movement, and then another curveball, and then a great changeup. Like piece by piece, he looks like a stud on the level with Glass now, but he's never really pitched like that. So it's hard for me to separate what's happening right now with the fact that I've been a little bit disappointed with him overall, given what I see as his upside. But I've bought in some keeper leagues. I'm willing to sit this one out in places where I'm, rebuilding and just want to maybe capitalize on this. It may take till next year. I can't necessarily recommend that you have to hold on to him in every league, because, the command just isn't there. And I think it's related to the injury. I'm not sure what another stint away from the team is going to do for that.
Okay, so building off of some of Eno's analysis and kind of bringing up another question here, Trevor, is this a problem where Bobby Miller might be too predictable? If you have great stuff like that and you don't get the results, like in what ways can you be underperforming, or what reasons could cause that underperformance other than like shaky command or something along those lines that can be a little more common for guys that have electric stuff?
Yeah, there's something every once in a while you run into a guy that passes the eye test and is impressive from everyone watching. Even guys hitting on deck are like preparing for something. They get up there and then they say they see something a little bit better than they thought they would, or something doesn't break as sharply as they thought it would, or this, for whatever reason, guys are on them a little bit more. And these guys show up. One famous example is the first guy at Driveline that had all the velo, Casey Weathers, just got through 100, 101 and could not get anybody out at high A. And there was something about the way that he threw that made that 101 look like it was 94. And that's what everyone said. They're like, that doesn't look hard at all. And it's going right to my barrel. I don't know what to tell you. And then they discovered dead zone fastballs and all kind of stuff. Now he doesn't have he movement wise and stuff. Plus, like it's really good. Everything's pretty good in a vacuum. So that tells me it's just how he's using things together. And you combined sequencing predictability probably with a little bit of the injury and lack of command, so the more mistakes and being predictable is going to lead to something like this. And what's keeping him kind of in that, he's a big leaguer still and he should be in the big leagues, is his pure stuff. But I think there's something's going to click some point. There's going to be some pitch that he starts using in some way. I love the Hunter Brown explanation too, because Hunter had the exact same issue, and then added just a two-seam sinker. It's not even that good in a vacuum, but it just sets everything else up. And he might be one of those guys because he's a curveball, hard curveball, four-seam fastball guy, and we're seeing how important it is for righties to throw something that moves in on righties, either a power changeup. And he has a changeup. I don't think he locates it well at all. He throws it up in the zone a lot. It's got a lot of downward movement, but doesn't move in as much. And so that doesn't really solve that problem. So that might be something he adds. I think he does. He might have a two-seam. I just don't think he's very comfortable in throwing it. And then you add an injury on top of all this, where there's some little movement that he's afraid to make because it doesn't feel very good. That could throw all your mechanics off, and then you just get frustrated, which is probably the reason it's ballooned to where it is, right? Though I think that if he didn't have the little injuries going on, he would still be, I think, struggling a little bit more than last year, just because he's kind of all over the place. And when you lose a little bit of confidence in your pitches, then you're not, now your stuff starts to diminish. So it's just a snowball that rolls downhill from there. So I hope that at least because maybe it's not something he's hurt enough to go on the IL for, and he can still work on some stuff, but they can, he throws once a week or whatever, and they can get him back going that way. Maybe that's the goal. The Dodgers are usually pretty on top of this stuff, so it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward.
It's hard to imagine a scenario where he's not contributing something to them at the end of the season. Maybe it's mid-August, sometime around then when we see him back. But even if they're healthier in the rotation then than they are now, they could use him as a reliever, a multi-inning reliever for a little while, and then go back to using him as a starter again next year. Right? There's a lot of ways this can work short-term for Bobby Miller as he tries to make those adjustments. But the current state of this Dodgers rotation, you got Landon Knack going today, and then I think the probables for the matchup against the Tigers this weekend, you've got Justin Robleski making his second big league start. James Paxton goes Saturday, and potentially Ryan Yarbrough just trying to eat some innings on Sunday before they get to the break. And they're dealing with a situation right now. Walker Buehler has no timetable for return. He's in Florida. He's away from the team, working out at Cressy's. So he's in a different situation. Now we're looking at guys like River Ryan. Ryan himself has been hurt a lot this year, but he is finally getting stretched out. He threw 5 innings Wednesday at Oklahoma City. We might be getting close to a River Ryan debut for the Dodgers as they try and patch things together in the back of this rotation.
It's amazing. It kind of reminds me of, maybe your typical Rays season, where you think they have a great rotation, and then you look up at some point in August and you're like, who is in this rotation right now? I do think Yamamoto will come back. I've been a little bit skeptical that Kershaw will come back because that was a real shoulder surgery. That was one that used to be a career ender. And, I've heard he's hitting 88, 89, which means he's sitting 87. So I'm still a little skeptical about Kershaw coming back and being a great starter for them. So that really leaves them with Tyler Glasnow, who's hurt, and on the IL right now with the back injury. So it's funny how, a dominant team with what seems like a great rotation is reaching for, their third or fourth best pitching prospect in July. But that's, I guess, the state of the modern game. It's the state of injury in the game today. I don't think that they do anything better or worse necessarily with injuries than other teams. But there is a little bit of they signed James Paxton knowing that he might not make it through the season. They didn't book on Clayton Kershaw, getting a bunch of innings from him this season. They knew that to some level, Landon Knack, they thought Emmett Sheehan was going to pitch this season. They thought that some of the young guys would pitch this season. I do wonder if this puts a little fire under their butt at the trade deadline and that we might see them acquire a starting pitcher. I think that almost seems like a guarantee now.
I wonder how many contending teams are we going to look at just in 2.5 weeks when we get to the deadline and say they don't need a starting pitcher. It's going to be 1 or 2 at most, probably. And the Phillies are in pretty good shape right now, even with 2 on the IL.
Mariners are all right.
Mariners are okay.
That's about it. I mean,
otherwise,
the Padres will, might get one. They don't, they may also just wait for some of their guys to get healthy.
Yeah. It's state of the game, as you said before, though, and that's been really frustrating. And producer Brian pointing out when the Giants get Cobb and Ray back, maybe they've actually got starters to deal away too. So it's a good position to be in. If you've got some healthy starters showing up before the deadline, you get a little excess, you might be able to swing a deal and get a lot better. But we'll see where it goes for the Dodgers. Let's move on to the Statcast birthday party. Statcast, already 10 years old. I remember when the Statcast era was new. It was like year 2 and year 3, and you'd label something like longest home run of the Statcast era, and you just felt like a jerk saying it or writing it, but you had to quantify it because there's a new way of measuring things, and now that's just the way it is. And it's become such a regular part of the conversation in baseball. You even hear a lot more about it on broadcast. It's not just the nerdcast anymore. You have more commentators willing to bring Statcast elements into the game. Statcast itself changing all the time. We talked earlier this year about the bat swing, the bat speed metrics that are available, and it's going to change some more, right? So, you wrote a story, with Stephen Nesbitt and Rustin Dodd this week, just looking at the big picture here, how it started and where it's going. I'm just curious, what has changed the most in your analysis over the life of Statcast?
Oh, we started a podcast with a Statcast metric in the name.
True.
Yeah, I mean we've really grown alongside Statcast, and I do think that it's ubiquitous now. When I talk to at least young pitchers, I feel like young pitchers all speak the language of movement and sort of statistical analysis. Hitters are a little bit more mixed, but even I've been talking to a bunch of hitters about contact point and bat speed, and they know what I'm talking about too. So I think hitters are used to their coaches being fluent in this, and they're used to talking to their coaches about these things, and they see it as mostly. I think most young players see this as a way to get better. And that might not be Statcast specific. That might be sort of metrics in general. But I do think it's interesting that Statcast specifically, how that has changed the way we consume media, how it has become, on every broadcast, and how we, and yet every time I publish about it, there is definitely a contingent that's like, I find this boring. I hate it. I don't like these broadcasts. I don't like it when it's in the broadcast. I don't like it in my stories. And I don't know if it's a vocal minority. I don't want to begrudge anybody their opinion on how, what they like about the game and how they want to consume it. But I do wonder if they're being left behind, or if maybe they'll just get used to it at some point, or if it's just a vocal minority. Like it's really hard in today's social media and comment section time to really get a sense of how many people feel left behind by Statcast in their broadcasts.
I think it's become much more digestible over time, though. I think people have found a common way to explain using Statcast things that we've known or thought about baseball for a long time. And I think that's where I get so frustrated by people who hate it. It's like, okay, wait a minute. A lot of the things that we're seeing and looking at through Statcast are things that players have always wanted to do. Right. I mean, it goes all the way back as far as like Ted Williams, at least in terms of.
Does a catcher want to have a good pop time? Yeah, we measure that now,
Yeah. And just
do people want to run fast? We measure that now,
Yeah. I always wanted years ago. I'm like, when I'd hear a scout say, fast bat, I'm like, okay, fast bat. Like, how fast? Like, it's really,
yeah. And who like, really has a good fast bat? And who do you just say, oh, he hits for power, he has a fast bat?
Yeah, I think what it's changed the most for me is being able to get a better feel for when processes are actually good, right? Not being tricked by your eyes, being able to quantify things that are actually going well, even though the results might tell you a different story. I think if you go back 10 years, I'd look at stuff like BABIP, and I had to put so much more weight on BABIP because we didn't have a lot of other things that would maybe be indicators of good or bad luck. And now I think you can see so much more in the process that you can understand, hey, this player's doing a lot of things right, but these handful of things that have gone wrong have completely skewed the results. So being able to find rebound candidates or breakout candidates, that's become easier. Everyone has access to it, but I think that's become easier, relatively speaking, over the life of Statcast.
I agree fully. Like to be honest, I haven't been using it to analyze from a media standpoint, obviously, but I always liked, like when I played basketball as a kid, this isn't Statcast, but this is kind of along the same way. Like the things we wanted to know, it's a sport all about athleticism. So you wanted to be able to like measure how athletic guys were. So it was always about, how
your vertical
acceleration speed, vertical jump, like average distance on the 3 points. Like we're fascinated by Steph Curry's ability to hit 28 footers. And I was fascinated by Nate Robinson with a 44-inch vertical. Like that was incredible to me, but I knew what that number was, but that was never I had to go look that up on the internet. And now it's like the dunk contest. You can see everything. And I think that causes it's like that just happened. And now I can understand why it might have happened, or if this guy can continue to do that. And another thing that enriches the game of baseball, to take it back to Statcast, was the predictability. Being able to be so immersed into a game where you look up and you see a pattern, like, oh, these things could happen, or this matchup could be really interesting. And then something cool happens. Like, remember the phenomenon where Tony Romo just got on a broadcast for the NFL, and like people just weren't expecting him to just be to call 10 plays in a row. and he just was calling exactly what they were, and he didn't play for the team, and they were like, oh my God, that's amazing. When in reality, there's like 3 choices for every play and every situation. But he had the experience, and then he was able to, like, people realize they're like, oh wow, I wish I was able just to predict things. This makes this really fun. This means I'm really into it. Like, you feel like you're part of it. And I feel like that's what Statcast has done in a lot of ways. If you like attach yourself to it, I think a lot of people, that the nostalgia of it is the Vince Scully days, the like romanticized storytelling part of things, where someone is explaining. It's like almost like mythological. It gets to the point where these, like the Willie Mays catch, for example, is the greatest over the shoulder catch ever. But like 100 guys have caught a ball like that since. But it wasn't. It was the timing, and it was like the technology at the time, and there wasn't very much footage of anything from that time, so they caught it on video. That was a big deal. Like all of those things made it historic. And I think that with maybe the over explanation of the granular explanation of what's going on, people are like, man, just let me be romantic about it. I don't need all the facts. I just want to like get excited by what I'm seeing, and that's enough for me. And I also understand that, but it's a business. Like, that doesn't make money. So it's, and look around.
I totally get what you're saying. Like, for some things, I want to know more about it, and knowing more about it makes me enjoy it more. And baseball happens to be one of those things. So if Marcus Semien hits a homer off Aroldis Chapman, like, it adds for me knowledge that, oh, Chapman has this much, vertical break, and Semien learned how to hit the vertical break from his teammate, and he's targeting the top half of the ball, and vertical break is right. Like, all that makes it even more impressive. It's like, oh man,
that's supposed to be unlikely. But like, if you look at these trends, it's actually not as unlikely we thought. All of these are interesting, no matter
how
which
it
way
fits in, right? Like, how does it fit into larger trends? How does it? Oh, he learned this from his friend. Like, there you start some storytelling. Oh, his friend told him this, and like, so then he told Matt Olson, and Matt Olson became good at, like, that's like storytelling. It's enriching the environment that I'm in. I'm like, I know more about it. But I also, coming out of school, really wanted to be a music and movie writer. And so I was studying, the movie writers. I was studying the music writers. I was doing a lot of it. I was the arts and events editor at Stanford at the Daily. And I was into it for a while. But the more I went into it, the less I liked movies and the less I liked music. And it bothered me to the extent that I swore it off and have never really written music or movie criticism since, because I don't want to be thinking too hard when I'm there. But art, I'm an art history minor. I love standing in front of a piece of art and seeing it just visually and viscerally, and just having a moment with it, and then reading the plaque. Like, I think you can do both. And to some extent, if you are the one who just wants to sit there and let it wash over you, and you don't want to read the plaque, I think you can still do that. You don't have to read my stories. You don't have to read my stories and come on there and be like, I didn't want to read the plaque. Why did I read the plaque? Don't tell me. I'm the plaque. I'm the plaque next to the thing. That's all I'm trying to do, is augment your experience. And that's, I think, what the best Statcast broadcasts are doing. It used to be, remember when it first came out, it was like every homer, you had to hear the exit velocity, and I think there's still some broadcasts that kind of do that. Don't do that. Please don't do that, because it's not meaningful on the level where every time you need to hear it. It's just meaningful.
Outliers. Give us outliers.
Hard
ones and low ones, please.
This was the hardest home run hit by a Tiger this year, at least. I want to hear, not, or the softest. I mean, that's kind of cool too. It's like, wow, he just barely got that over. I don't really want to hear, oh, that was 103 with a 28-degree. What does that mean? What, you're not giving me any context. Not part of a story. Use it to tell stories. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it should be a complementary tool in the broadcast. The best broadcasters use that very effectively. It's not. Can you imagine watching a game where every single pitch velocity was called out by the announcer? They don't do that. So that'd be absurd.
Every single one.
But I do like it when a pitcher has been sitting 93, 95 for most of the start. They hit 98, and the announcer calls attention to that, because that
Sonny Gray against Torrey Hunter in the playoffs.
Yeah. So it's the same kind of usage, just doing it for outliers, as Trevor said. I think Trevor's getting a Sid Bream comp here from Derek in the Live Hive from a look. No one, it's not because he played for the Expos, but because of a similar look. I was trying to pull up an image. I'll try to throw it up on the site here or on the screen here in just a little bit. But I think there is something to that. We've got kind of a forward-looking question related to this. Like, what's relatively new right now that we care about, that we think is going to be even better 10 years down the road? And you can use something new within Statcast if you want, or if you want to even say limb tracking, which isn't really available at all publicly yet. Is that going to change a lot about how we analyze the game? Like, where do you think we're headed going forward?
I mean, I think the limb tracking is going to be really huge for players and for player development. I wonder how much it'll filter in towards broadcasts because, I'd struggle with like imagining a broadcaster talking about scapular retraction angles.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be good if they do
back
that.
shoulder or his hip shoulder separation. His hip shoulder separation on that fastball was in the top 2 percentile. Nah, I don't see it. It is the kind of thing that people in player development will care about a lot and do care about and have been caring about and is hugely important into how the game is played right now. And I think these sort of things have been huge developmental advantages for the Twins, Yankees, Dodgers, and I think the Astros leverage some of this. So I think these things matter, but I wonder how much of it will come down. Now, bat speed, I think will have its at some point will have its moment, like exit velocity, where they're gonna report bat speed on a lot of things, maybe too much at first, at some point. But I do think there's something there where. I think I would like to hear on a broadcast that somebody had the best bat speed in the big leagues. I think that would add. I think that'd be interesting.
I agree. I it's hard because I feel like I think we talked about this in our outline day yesterday, just about how like everyone's trying to predict what's next for the after the internet, for our hugest technological advancement in history, and it's those things are impossible to predict because that was such a revolutionary thing. They couldn't have predicted that before that. So kind of the advanced metrics are kind of the revolution in baseball, and so it feels like it's just going to be an iteration on that, or like even getting more granular. And I like the stuff that they're doing with like weather patterns and how specific that's getting within parks. But again, it's gonna be interesting to see how teams like know that and put that in play, have a better understanding of how parks and times of the day affect things, because there's some pretty massive ones that I still think are being underutilized. Like how do we change when we go to Colorado? Like there's some pretty big environmental places, and pretty much every year or two they are upgrading. There's so many different systems in for mocap and motion capture and stuff in stadiums. Like people are adding stuff all the time, but Hawkeye's the big one everyone's using, and like the frame rate on the cameras and the quality of the cameras is increasing like really quickly.
They just updated it, like all the cameras, so they're all 300 now. So
and they were 240, which 60 frames is a lot, and that it's going to get more specific, and the ball is they're going to know exactly where the ball is in the stadium at all times. When guys holding it, it's going to track it the whole time. And when that happens, I think some interesting stuff is going to come from that. But I'm just,
we might define late break. It just occurred to me while you're talking. We might be able to define late break better because we'll have just the movement all the way.
There's a lot of those questions I think that are like we still have holistic explanations of things, and we're going to be able to get very, very, very specific, which unfortunately is going to probably bring out some random new pitch names, and we're going to have to adjust to that as media people again. But I don't think that's ever going to end. And then the last thing I think is going to be interesting, and something I'm really interested in, is I think people are going to start taking a lot of the statistics and start to figure out how to start to associate patterns in types of things with guys' mindsets, what's going on in their head, their intentions. I was noticing that patterns are showing up based on how guys hitting approaches are changing, and it's getting pretty glaring based on how pitchers are leaning so heavily on one pitch every single year. It's a different pitch, and so hitters are doing the same thing, but then it becomes predictable. So like scouting reports, and then therefore the broadcast will be able to be like quantifying clutch, for example, guys who handle that better than others outside of just the basic stuff. I think that's going to go a long way in terms of advanced analytics.
There's something that came off of this is right up your alley. It was such a great thing there, Trevor. One thing that didn't go into the story was Corey Schwartz talking about you talk about a smart base runner, right? And you think that like maybe that's something you couldn't put a metric on, but in fact, smart base running is just knowing the probabilities and reacting correctly, right? So now that we measure everything, you can look at a baseball player in mid, between first and second, and you can actually start to say, how good that arm is. It can throw 97, 98. So the probability of how fast that ball can come in from the outfield to third base or to second base. So you can start to say, the probability of him getting an out on the base pass. And you can kind of start to look at all the different angles that guy's thinking in his head. And you can, to some extent, start to make a list of smart base runners, that are having baseball smarts. That'd be something that you wouldn't predict that a metric could really do. But if you sort of define all the variables around it and all the probabilities around it, the missing part is the brain, is like the smarts, right? So
exactly.
Like this guy happens to put himself in best positions where he doesn't get thrown out when he could. And then, a thing that was in the piece was like, you can take that, and we talked about the Jeter play, the flip, and you can start to do with AI and with these 3D visualizations that we have is if we have a big play, I don't know if they'll be able to do this maybe in the same game, but maybe if they get to this level, you might be able to have a big play, and then you might be able to have a simulation of that same play where like maybe Tatis is hurt and he's on the bench. And so some other guys, Azokar is out there and there's a big play and something happens and Azokar and maybe the guy's safe or something and the game's over. Then maybe the next day, at least you could be like, this is what that play would look like if Tatis was out there. Because we know what Tatis's arm looks like. We know what all that's like. So that's kind of fun, I think. I don't know if you'll be able to do it so quickly you could do it during a game, but I think that maybe at some point, if we're talking 10 years from now, we're sitting here, like that might be something that's on broadcast where it's like, here's a simulation of that had he gone. Oh, how about like the sending the guy at third?
Yeah,
right?
good send, bad send. Yep.
Yeah, you hold the guy and then they simulate what would have happened if you'd sent the guy. And they can do it because they know arm strength and they know all that stuff. So, that sort of stuff I think is only fun. I don't know. It's fun to sort of show me what it would have been like if, I'm sitting here yelling at the third base coach right now. He should have sent him. Then they simulate it. Oh, he was out. Oh, all right.
there is one thing that I actually from that article, and if you should read it if you haven't, but right at the beginning with a lot of guys were like, what about the Jeter play where he cuts the ball off where he wasn't supposed to and he flipped it like you just mentioned? And but we won't get those if we're always making like that's kind of a common decision. Like if we're constantly trying to do the only fundamental play every single time, we won't get those moments. And I go, yeah, of course you got to react to the play in the game, but the what metrics are doing, just getting you in position to do things, not do the thing that you practice exactly.
Human beings out there still got to do it.
So if you think, so whenever I explain this, I'm like, okay, let's run the exact same play 100 times with a bunch of different, like a simulation. And how often is it going to work out the way that it worked out? And it's probably not very high. There's just because of the things that had to happen.
That would add to my enjoyment of that play.
Exactly.
You already have a sense that like
we want to tell you that it's not a high
play. That was crazy.
It's a great play. We're not saying it's a bad play or it wasn't fundamental. You're just saying this is actually how rare and how it actually makes it even crazier. Yeah. But you wouldn't teach a kid to be like, cut this off every once in a while for like you would never teach them that, because overall that's just going to be a bad habit that's going to lead to more mistakes than it working out. Right, and that's what analytics are supposed to do. That creating that understanding. So
I did. We got some Live Hive stuff about slides. I have
no idea on stats.
Just like, but like, I've never actually seen one, but I do know like an executive that came to spring training and said, this is how you guys should be running the bases, and put cones out and told all the veterans that they had to relearn how to run the bases in spring training. So it could go both ways. That's a little bit of the pencil necks, as Jeff Francoeur kept referring to nerds. Sometimes you can take it too far. He said that over and over again. It was kind of amazing.
Wasn't Francoeur the guy that got convinced that someone was deaf for a month? Let's just relax.
Maybe just everybody's
Maybe
a
not
pencil
you,
next to him.
Frankie. Maybe not you.
Everybody's a nerd to the guy they convinced that someone was deaf for a month.
One of my favorite stories ever.
Unreal. Slide metrics too. I mean, there's the okay. So there's a couple different things. Like there's ways you approach the bag. There's like how like the timing of when you slide. There's the ability to swim around tags. Like there's all of these very small things that those get really hard and really granular as far as like teaching and breaking it down. Some of that is athletic ability. Some of that is practice and repetition and just learning. Look, how are these guys going to try to tag me? How can I go into the bag in a way where I can get around that tag? Like that's constantly changing.
But could you optimize
swim?
Yeah, but could you also optimize the slide for like, being as fast as possible, but also stopping as quickly as possible? What is the optimization there in terms of there's like velo, acceleration, deceleration, and you kind of want to be sliding over, like you don't want to lose, you don't want to be zero at the bag, right? Because then you decelerate too much before. No, I would say zero past the bag.
Yeah.
But not too far past the bag, because then you lost the
off.
bag. But if you're at zero right at the bag, then you could have been going a little faster. So maybe you have like slide points where it's like, where's the optimal point to jump into your slide? And
I feel like these are quick guys who are quick, right? And they should be stealing good amounts of bags, but efficiency, like it could really make them a very good base runner, even though maybe they're not as fast as the Ellie Daily Cruises, right? So it's the same thing as velo, right? It's guys who throw 92 need to be a little bit more fine. But there's a way to do it. I think there's probably a way to do it to where you can train yourself to make yourself as efficient as possible. And then know what a guy's normal pop time is, know what your normal time is to get a second, and make a pretty accurate, like be like, I don't see many ways in which I beat the ball there. So I'm just not going to run to this guy. And it's just, then you shut it down.
There's
that
some
day,
of that.
you
There's
run
a
all
lot
over
of that
other
right
guys.
now, where there's just like a pop time. The runner knows the pop time and just knows if he can beat it or not. Or not the pop time, it's the pitcher time. They know the pitcher times, and they're just like, I know if I can beat it or not. I mean, But we have seen advancement in base running recently that the Yankees spearheaded, which is the kind of hop turn. It looks a little bit like a running start or something, but it has to do with getting your feet into position to accelerate quickly. And basically it looks almost like a running start, but it's more complicated than that. It has to do with turning their body in the right direction and getting their feet into the ground in the right way. So that's been kind of going around baseball. So if you watch base stealers as they take off, and there are different techniques for that turn, that first step, and how they get going. And some of that's been informed by, I think, biometrics and biomechanics.
That makes a lot of sense, though, right? Like, think about where you're looking and how your body is positioned when you're looking to see if the pitcher is going to throw over versus how your body's positioned when you actually take off. So, yeah, getting to that ready position as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible, that would give you a huge edge if there's a better way to do that. It's just like, if you're a sprinter, Olympics are coming up, having the optimal configuration for your start is critically important.
Oh yeah, Mason Wynn talked to me
so much time on that.
Yeah.
Mason Wynn is a kid of sprinters, and he talked to me about how his father would hold a pole out, and you don't want to get vertical too quick. You kind of, because you're in that drive position when you're when your back is, when you're down, you're in that drive position, and that's like, you don't want to just get a pop up. You kind of want to go from drive up, and there's like this gradual kind of standing up. And his father would hold a pole out, and he'd have to like run under it at first, because he was trained by sprinters. So, there's form. And then I talked to Carl Crawford a lot about the length of stride. Like, long strides can be good for being fast, but the longer your stride is, the more stress you put on your hamstrings, and the more often you can get injured. So there's
Buxton.
Yeah, that could be it.
That was always Buxton's thing, is long strides.
Yeah, and Crawford said he like kind of worked on shortening stride a little bit, because Carl Crawford got hurt a lot too.
See, I got a nice short stride, probably because I wear boat shoes. I don't get a lot of hamstring quad strains, so it's all about the boat shoes. I'm not running in them. It's just during the day when I'm walking around in my boat shoes, keeping things ready for my running, waddling around out there. That's my secret. Been waddling my whole life. So we're going to take a look at something that happens on occasion. This was inspired by a sequence that I saw in a game last Saturday. It was a Dodgers-Brewers game. Shocker. I was watching the Brewers on the weekend. And we had Freddie Peralta facing Will Smith with the bases loaded in the fourth inning. It's sped up if you're watching on YouTube. It's an 11-pitch sequence. Freddie was ahead 1-2 in this count. And eventually, Freddie Peralta on the 11th pitch gets Will Smith the strikeout with a high fastball. And it just got me thinking, right? There was only one out in this sequence. Bases were still loaded, 2 outs, and Freddie Freeman steps in after that. And I'm watching this game thinking this pitch count is already like near the end. Like Freddie Peralta is going to leave this game soon. Freddie Freeman's probably the last batter he's facing, regardless of outcome. He gets Freeman out, ends up getting out of a tough spot. But it made me wonder what happens during and even after an extended plate appearance, because especially with the pitch clock now in place, you don't have as many ways to slow the game down after a particularly challenging plate appearance. So Trevor, just kind of thinking about the cumulative effect of a plate appearance, like how challenging is that now in the pitch clock era versus in the pre-pitch clock era?
It's definitely harder now. Conserving energy is a huge, it's just something you are thinking about for your ever, since you were a kid, and how long and deep into games you can go and how many pitches you're at. And when you are you want to be efficient up to a point. If you're a strikeout guy, yeah, you're willing to throw more pitches sometimes, but if that means throwing 4 1/3 innings, you can't be there. You're trying to get your 6 in, and he's a strikeout guy. Freddie is definitely. But that was an issue I ran into a lot in my career. Is I was willing to sacrifice a 25 pitch inning if it meant a 0, as opposed to trying to throw a 16 pitch inning and, giving up a quick solo homer and then having a little bit quicker ABs. Now, there were days where maybe that was a little bit better situation. We had a bigger lead or whatever, but in terms of keeping me fresh, but I would always try to throw the 0, and that taxes you, especially against a team like the Dodgers, right? There's just no let up. There's no where you're like, oh, finally this guy's up. There's rarely, a guy in that lineup that's like that. So if you can go, and even if it ends with the strikeout of 11 pitches, like you're getting a guy on the ropes, and you're putting first of all, you're getting more pitches to see, therefore getting a higher chance of getting a mistake. The longer it goes, the more tired he's going to be. So you're just constantly fighting and trying to get a pitch. It's just once you get exhausted, and then you also, once you get to pitch like 7, you're no longer doing sequencing anymore. You're throwing what the best pitches are because you want this AB to be over. You forgot what you even threw in the first pitch, so it's you're not pulling as much as you are kind of going raw stuff, and that just changes where it's just you versus him, and it's hard to like fool somebody or mess up timing, so you start to throw in weird stuff. But
you're not best pitches.
You're not best pitches. You're going to. I always had notes where like this pitch is out of bounds unless it's pitch 9 of the AB. And he's just been fouling off that pitch that he's not supposed to hit well. Which we're going to talk about a guy in a moment where that's actually true. Where I would have just completely shut his pitch down until a certain point. So that's what happens, and that's what the Dodgers do so well, and that's what having talent like that is good, because not only that, they're not strikeout guys either. They grind ABs and they're good hitters, and it's just a nightmare to pitch to them. And if they can't hit a guy is absolutely dialed in. If they can put some 10 pitch ABs together, at least you can get them out in the 5th and then have to go to their bullpen. And the 5th inning, guy comes out, there's usually not enough depth in a bullpen to have the shutdown guys for the rest of the game. You're going to get somebody who you can probably hit around a little bit, and that's the goal. That's what they do really well. And even though he struck out, and even though that didn't work out, that's going to pay dividends as the game goes on, because he's out earlier, even if they didn't produce any runs then. So that's just the name of the game right there. And that was a great AB, and those were good pitches. So he wasn't like missing middle and he was fouling them off. He was fouling off everything Freddie wanted to throw him, and he was throwing them where he wanted. And that's a blow to your confidence too when you're out there. Like, I feel good. I'm hitting my spots, and I cannot get this guy out. And Freddie's on deck. So
yeah, right.
It's like cool. I feel really good because he's not missing anything that everyone else usually misses. That's not a place you want to be, and I hated being there too.
Yeah, you could see at the end of that sequence too, after he gets the strikeout, he looks pretty tired, but he also glanced over at his dugout like, is that it? Because that could have been the exit point for him too. They could have went to the pen for that Freeman at bat if they wanted to. But the mental side of that is huge. And I've got this chart that Eno found from Beyond the Box Score, a great site that is unfortunately no longer around. But it looks at the average WOBA. This chart shows you average WOBA after each pitch in the plate appearance. And I think it's interesting. It basically just goes up from 4 on to about pitch 12. It dips at pitch 13 and 14, but I think that's because there aren't that many 13 and 14 pitch
There's
plate
a
appearances.
weird sample thing that happens there, especially at 16, 17, 18. So it is actually, I wouldn't call this conclusive. I mean, 4 through 12, there's a lot of sample. And part of what's going there is that on base percentage is, of course, going up because you've got 3 balls, right?
Yeah.
If you're at 12 pitches without 3 balls, that's crazy. So, so the on base percentage goes up, but there is a corresponding rise in slugging percentage that fits along with this. It's not just on base percentage. And then as the sample falls apart at the end, that is actually not, I don't know what the trend is there. I would have cut this graph off maybe at 12 or 13 because I'm not, the sample really degrades after that. And I'm not sure. I think, by the time you get to pitch 14, I could see it turning back in the pitcher's favor to some extent, because by then you definitely have 2 strikes, it's like, so, at some point, the hitter's just going to miss one that he thought, or you get a call or, you just dot the one that you're finally trying to dot. So, I would
remember
say
too, the hitter at that point is swinging every single pitch.
he's tired too.
So he's tired too. So you're swinging more. The longer the AB is going on, the higher percentage of the pitches are being swung at.
Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is actually a little downturn at the end. If that sort of 12 to 13 downturn that we saw in 12 to 13 pitch, where again it starts to swing back towards the pitcher a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised because, how many times has a pitcher thrown 14 consecutive pitches? All the time.
It's
How
going to
many
happen.
times has a batter swung 14 times in one at bat? Not
less
at all.
often.
Not many.
Yeah. So I think batters are probably optimized to swinging, 5 times when they get up there at most.
Yeah.
So once it starts getting to 10 and 12, you start being like, wow, like I'm actually like, think about also the home run derby and how they changed the rules this year because, batters are like, well, I'm not used to swinging that hard. And anybody who broke a record, didn't play as well after because they were just gassed and they looked gassed. So this is a slightly smaller version of that. I mean, they're taking 40 swings. We're talking about 14 or 10 or whatever. But I still do think that at some point it swings a little bit towards the pitcher where the hitter's a little bit gassed and just trying to keep up. What was the pitch that ended the at bat for Freddie Peralta? A 98-mile-an-hour fastball.
I think it was his fastest fastball of the entire outing, too.
Which is a little bit easier for a pitcher to do, right? They could at some point be like, okay, fine, here we go. Here's my best fastball. Whereas the hitter's like, I don't know, do I have my best swing in me right now? I've just swung so many times.
And again, that comes from the game situation here being one where Freddie might have been like, all right, I'm coming out of this game soon. Let's start airing it out. Because I want to at least get this guy. I'm done regardless. Let me just get through this. It's interesting, too. He seems to have become someone that preserves velocity a little better than he did at the beginning of his career. When he first came up and he was fastball Freddie, it was a little more erratic, I think, from a velocity standpoint than it has been these last couple of seasons when he's moved more into that ace level tier for a lot of folks.
I would also say that just generally, this is really hard to study. This effect and things like hangover effects, because if you think about it, like we did find a little bit of a Wakefield hangover effect, knuckleball hangover effect, but in order to really find that, you need to project the quality of every player after. You need to basically simulate the game and say this game didn't do as, like, the hitters in this didn't do as well as I simulated them. You can't just be like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just like,
they didn't do as well. Like, it's,
they didn't do as well.
You
like,
have to isolate
there's so much noise in that. You have to somehow isolate that. So it's really hard to study this stuff. I saw a different study that looked at foul balls and suggested that the number of foul balls in an at bat had no real effect on the chance of a hit, and so that kind of goes in the face of this analysis from James Gentile at Beyond the Box Score. But I would just say that it's really hard to study. There's a lot of variables, a lot of noise. There's fatigue from the hitter, the pitcher. We talked about that, but there's also just how many pitch types does the pitcher have? Like, wouldn't you think in a long at bat, a pitcher with 5? What about Seth Lugo or Chris Bassett in a
the longer
14
that goes
pitch?
on, the better he has an advantage. Yeah,
Because he's just got 14. He's got 8 pitches. He can go to any one of the 8 pitches. But if you're in a 14 pitch battle with Graham Ashcraft, well, you've seen his 2 pitches 7 times.
Yeah, I guess that's where starter versus reliever, the quality of your stuff, like all of those factors would come
So
into
much
play.
stuff, yeah.
But I would imagine that command wanes over the course of a long plate appearance. We could probably quantify that just with location plus or some kind of modeling. We'd see, okay, eventually things aren't as crisp
because
you're not executing as well
because you're fatigued, like because there's less time between pitches versus like, I mean, are we talking about like there's 20 seconds between pitches, 30 seconds maybe with like everything that happens, and then how much time do you get between ABs? Is it much more? A minute?
More.
25, 30 seconds, I think.
Depends on which park you're in and what team you're on.
Yeah, and when they start the clock.
The intern up there turns the clock on if they're a stickler on it, or if they're not. There's some places where they are not. They don't care.
Maybe it's just mentally exhausting. You're facing the same batter. You don't get any sort of wipe to be like, oh, I'm going in different. You're like, this is the same guy. I have to keep doing the same thing.
It just comes down, your focus kind of wanes, and then who breaks first? Who wants it to be over first? Like it really comes down to that sometimes, where it's like, I can't even think about my approach anymore. I'm so tired. And the guy pitching's like, I can't even think about the target before I'm throwing, because I'm just like, let's just go. And you're just going stuff on stuff. It really does get super simple. You turn into little leaguers by the end. You really do. And you can tell when the hitter is, you can tell when it's swinging, where the hitter's staying on his approach. He's fouling off those tough pitches and the pitcher's getting frustrated. Yeah, I think you can see it pretty clearly. And vice versa.
Peralta, 98 mph. Yeah. Like, okay, here.
And he just wasn't giving in. You could see on his face, like, I'm not giving in to you. And that's what you want to see. But neither one of them were. And it was a great at bat. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a great matchup.
But you had some issues with the pitch clock, Trevor, and command. And so, I could see how not like all the things that people teach, and you probably know more about this, but you see a lot of the sort of breathing techniques, the big, the big sort of, reset.
I do that too, yeah.
Maybe look at something that's not the hitter. What are some of the things you were taught, and then why did those break down during the pitch clock? Like, how did command sort of spiral on you, even though you had been taught these different ways of coping with, bad spirals?
That was always in the under the context that you could slow it down more if you needed to. So like
you could walk around the mound.
Yeah, ideally you didn't want to. You wanted to be. They're like, have a rhythm, but if you have to get out of your rhythm, that is a strategy. And then they're like, no, it's not a strategy anymore. And then I realized how often I did that, because you don't like when you don't really think about it. You're like, this is just my normal cadence.
Walking around the mound.
I'm just walking around the mound, and I'm slowing myself down, and I sweat a lot. I need to reset, and I want to throw hard too. And it turned out that like when I am put on a clock, I had a really strong reaction to it. Like being rushed is something that I've always had to kind of gets me anxious. So I have that already. I'm predisposed for it. And it just was like it exacerbated it big time, to where I just stopped doing the breath. I thought I didn't have time. I just subconsciously just went, go. And I wasn't even going and lining myself up. I was just doing stuff that I was never doing before. And I was looking at the clock more because I needed to pay attention. I felt like it was always looming. And what actually helped was one in the minors, I just took a violation, and it didn't matter at all. I was like, oh, I can just get one. Then I'll just flirt with it. And then I didn't look at the clock for the rest of the year. Not one time did I look at it. David Robertson actually told me to do that. Or not me. He told Ottavino, and then Ottavino told me. He's like, I just stopped looking at it. Just stop looking at it. Just chance it. Who cares? Get him. Eventually you'll figure it out. And it's not that big of a deal. And I was like, okay. And so that was the big thing. But yeah, I had to train the breath to where I was doing it like as I was getting the pitch, like saying yes and breathing. And that worked a lot. And then the one target thing was, so we talked about, I just adopted, I noticed the Rays doing it. Shay, give me this target. We're going to work off this target, and I'll let you know if we change it. And that way we were just immediately on the same page. The pitch was called, and I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. So I could worry about lining myself up, and then it suddenly wasn't an issue anymore. That and the windup. I went out of the windup again. So I could step back, and then stop the clock.
Oh, so you started using some disengagement sometimes?
Just like with nobody on, I just started going out of the windup again. A lot of guys started doing that, relievers, because you could stop and like pause for a second just to gather yourself, lock everything in, and go. If you
during the middle of your
If you needed to, yeah, you could go slower if you wanted, but it was all a rhythm thing. Get on and go, get on and go. And so I just got going on this dance that I didn't have to do as a reliever. It was the
I
first
also
time I had
like
to do.
that you took the violation and were like, oh, this big bad bear, you know,
I thought it would be embarrassing, like a balk.
the emperor has no clothes, you know. It's
But
like,
he just steps out. He goes, "It's 1-0." I'm like, "What else is new?" You know?
yeah, I could have thrown the pitch and it could have been 1-0, you know.
Or
Yeah,
it's
if you
2-2,
throw
and
the
I go, it's
pitch,
3-2. I'm like, whatever. That's my best count, man. Don't hit me 3-2.
So Kyle Finnegan this year, and Chris Bassett have seemed to have taken on your strategy a little bit. Kyle Finnegan has 9 violations, and Chris Bassett has 7.
One real tough one. There was one that was real tough there.
Oh, did it really hurt him in a game?
Finnegan ended the game, walked off, walked a guy in the base loaded. But I mean, there was no outs, and it was probably going to end. But like, I was like, just can we turn it off in this specific situation, just so the game can't end this way, please?
You're right. That is kind of a crappy way to end things.
Yeah.
I've seen Bassett do it, and Bassett is just an ornery dude. You know, I feel like he is just like, F you, clock. Like, I've seen him. It's 3, 2, 1, and then he gets it a lot of times just barely in time. I think
and he's okay with
it. And he doesn't. 7 times he didn't, but he's not changing who he is. You know,
it's about, at the end of the day, Chris Bassett, knowing him really well at this point, it's about the pitching, and he's like, I'm just not going to let anything get me out of the pitching. And if that makes something another obstacle that I have to work around or whatever, then so be it. But I'm going to keep trying to make the best pitches I can because I have to.
7 extra
I love that.
balls
It's just
for a starter over the course of a season.
Yeah,
I
reliever that could hurt a little bit more, but
Right.
like I think that's a good. Just go for it, and then just try to avoid it. There's going to be a time or two where you're like, I really just don't need a violation right now. But for the most part, if you just accept that that's the way it is, then it might happen. It just doesn't happen that often, and that's what I remember Robertson got one. And he's walking in, and he's hyped up because he's trying to close the game. He's like, I'm not looking at the clock. I'm not looking at the clock. I'm not going to look at the clock. So don't. And the guy's like, look at the. And he's like, I'm not looking at it. So don't tell me to look at it. Just tell me I got one, and let's go.
But
and
if you were trading for Kyle Finnegan, would you like think about like, oh God, we're going to put him in the playoffs, and he's got 9 pitch clock violations?
I mean, that would give me pause, but I'm sure you could get a little information on like why he's doing that, and that could be remedied. It's not a huge problem. Yeah. It's not like he's going to be out there and be like, oh, I don't care about violations in Game 7 of the NL.
Right.
Like, I'm sure he's going to think about it maybe a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah. The mentality might be just a little different in October than it is in the first half of the regular season. Let's get to our game plan segment. Let's talk about how we should have someone pitch to Gunnar Henderson. It is very difficult, because Gunnar Henderson hits pretty much everything. I'm going to throw it to you first. You brought a chart. What would you do against Gunnar Henderson?
Yeah, I'm the analytics dork. Here I am. I'm the advanced scout saying,
Pencil neck.
I'm Mr. Pencil Neck. Trevor, this is how you got to pitch to him. And the first one, the chart on the left is his contact rate, and there's obvious blue at the top. And you say, this guy's a low ball hitter, easy peasy. Don't worry about it. Just fill up the zone high with fastballs on him. He's got 70% contact rates up there. And then you flip over, and this is always important. We've talked about this a lot on our facing on how to pitch to segments and stuff like this, is you have to think about multiple things that are happening. So, you have to kind of switch what you're looking for in terms of the analytics. Like, if I just look at contact rate, it's obvious to throw him high fastballs. But if I switch over to his slugging percentage on fastballs, I see, oh God, there's a lot of red up there. So he might, swing and miss more at the high fastballs, but he might also just go tank, so it's not like a super safe place to live. It's not a hole. It's not a hole like, there are other people that JJ Bleday or maybe a Cody Bellinger, where they have lower contact rates in the upper half, and they don't also hit for power up there. This is Gunnar Henderson that probably has 2 swings. One little side note that's kind of interesting about this is this pattern here, where there are lower contact rates high in the zone, but good slugging up in the zone, is true for Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser, and Jordan Westberg, along with Gunnar Henderson. So that's 4 players that are huge parts of that team that have developed some sort of second swing, some sort of way to attack. And I would say that even when those guys are struggling, it's a little bit about anticipation. So the one thing I would say to my pitcher is you can throw the high fastball, but if you think he's on it, don't throw it again, because he's trying to anticipate and put some sort of secondary swing that he's got. He's got some sort of trick in his bag about how to hit that high pitch for power. And if he sees you coming a mile away, he's gonna pull out that swing and go yard. So you got to convince him somehow that you're gonna pitch to him low.
Is there another thing you can do, Trevor, in terms of maybe throwing a fastball in a completely unexpected situation when you see that sort of feast famine approach for a guy with the high fastball in particular?
Yeah, that was actually a great segue. He is teams are doing this more, and you can kind of get their philosophy. The cool thing about all the guys you just mentioned is they are all natural low ball hitters. They cover the bottom of the zone pretty much all the way across really well, with the lefties really hitting the down and in the strike zone. So like a gyro slider down and in to Henderson is probably the worst idea ever, because it's not moving in the way that you need a big moving fastball to him to get any sort of bad swing. But he hits him slider to get him to swing and miss. But what they're doing is they're like, how can I get to the high fastball? Because everyone throws everything high now, even sinkers. And cutters. They're getting cutters up and in. These are all kind of the same classification, something harder that is the top of the zone that either moves in, moves away, or stays true or rides. And everyone uses versions of that. So they're like, we have to be able to hit this pitch somehow. And they've created an approach where they're identifying either a pattern or a count or like mid counts. For me, I'm seeing a big adjustments in mid counts, like 1-1s, 2-1s, like hitters counts. Guys are like feeling good about throwing their fastball up as an option that they have command over. So like get these ones, and they're able to do that without losing their ability to crush every pitch that's down in it. So all of them are keeping that nitro zone where like, I never miss this pitch and I can get this pitch every once in a while. That creates this dissonance in pitchers' heads that makes them maybe make more mistakes or think they're seeing something, like you were mentioning, that isn't actually happening. And so I would notice that, and I would try to start him with something that might be one of those high risk pitches, especially if it's starting leading off an inning, nobody's on base, 1 out, whatever, where you can avoid to give up a solo shot. Maybe I throw a first pitch gyro slider down and just get a strike one, because first pitch he doesn't swing as much. So it's like, maybe I can get away with this, make him think that I can get him out with that pitch, and then just never throw it again.
He's going to be looking for his pitch early, you'd think. Yes, so if you give him not his pitch early,
yeah. Not the one that he's crushing in the mid counts. He's like, oh, well, now I'm in mid counts. If he throws that again, I'm gonna crush it. Then you just don't throw it again. So either a slider or like a fastball up and in is what I would try. Even if I miss either one of those things, now he thinks that that's part of my approach because it's the first pitch I threw. That's how you set the tone, and then you just flip it. His misses are fastballs up and away. You can't just stay there, but you can set him up for it. And the pitch he hits the softest from righties is changeups, obviously, and lots of soft contact. He rolls them over a lot more often, like to second base. That's his double play pitches. And I have a good changeup. So it would be like setting him up with one of those high risk, high reward pitches early in a count. Maybe not if the second and third no outs, but if the situation calls for it where I can afford to give up a double or something, maybe I'll take a chance and just get ahead of him. And then from there, it is fastballs up and away, and then using that changeup. But it's like the changeup is the only pitch that I would double up on, because even if he identifies it, the movement and the change in speed still might get a miss-hit pitch. Yeah, and he might have to go oppo with it. Now he's got juice that way, but he's got more juice pull. So now it's like you're mitigating risk, and that is kind of how I would approach it, depending on how I felt that day. And then my late pitch, if I get 9, 10, 11 pitches,
what's your 9th pitch?
Maybe the sweeper comes out. I avoid throwing sweepers to lefties, but
maybe like backdoor.
Maybe backdoor. Backdoor is like the last. The Tanner Houck. I try to hit Tanner Houck him and hope it doesn't break over and right into that down and in, and try to get him to freeze. But like, that's not a pitch that I ever did on purpose. So I would have to it'd be at dire straits to do that. But those are just in the back pocket. I don't like to eliminate them fully, because you never know. You don't want to be a 2-pitch guy for too long.
I like this matchup because it points out to the fact that you can't just like zone in on, their perceived weakness and just attack that weakness, because they self-scout and they know what they're doing, So like if you just come high fastball, he's like, yo, dude, I see you coming, and here we go.
Yeah.
Here's my high
very
fastball
easy
swing.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what superstars do. Like that's why
Yeah.
he's going to be. I think this is a projectable thing. This isn't just like Gunnar Henderson going off because it's a sophomore year and he's young, guys haven't figured him out. No, this is like sustainable. Like Bryce Harper had this too. Like this is sustainable. He does things and he adjusts the way,
Right.
and he's a slightly different guy every time you see him. That's when you know a guy's going to be good and be good regularly, health permitting.
Right, because he'll like if he does have these two swings, and then people are like, okay, I'll throw the early high fastball when he's looking for something.
He's going to
low
adjust to that.
Then he'll be like, okay, I'm going to break out my high fastball swing early in counts because I'm starting to see a lot.
Because I can do that. I can hit that pitch. It's just when. So if you change when you throw it, I know I can hit it. So if I just change when I'm swinging, I'm going to get you.
Right. Yeah. So,
and then if that happens, those guys are like, oh, well, then he hit that one. Now what do I do? Like, you know what I mean? Like now they're all now you got to make an adjustment.
Now he has a month where he hits 380 with 16
exactly, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the past calendar year for Gunnar right now sits at 279, 349, 561, 42 homers, 19 steals, 134 runs, and 106 RBIs just to round out our 5x5 roto categories. He's fourth in homers. Only Judge, Marcell Ozuna, and Kyle Schwarber have more homers in the past calendar year than Gunnar Henderson. It's a level of power that I think even if you really liked him as a player, as a prospect, you didn't think he was a 40-plus home run guy on an annual basis.
He's in the home run derby.
He is.
He's gonna ask his pitcher to give him low and in, right? Or just like low, middle.
Probably,
low.
yeah. Like he'll be like, keep it close to me. Keep it close to me. This bottom quarter of the
that'll
zone
be really. I think it'll be really interesting. Just watch this because I learned a lot about Vlad Guerrero from the home run derby because he was like, I want it high and tight.
Pete does it too. Literally, Pete like does his little hand thing. That is what he's doing. Yeah. He's like, that's the pitch I get to. and but he'll tell you, he'll be like, hey, here, whatever. And in BP, he'd always be like, throw up and away. I can't hit that right now. So, and he just try to take that oppo. And that's
Vladdy in the home run derby to his manager, I think, was throwing to him. And he was like, there was one moment where he's like, right here. And then you realize
this is the spot right now. Do it.
He loves just like yanking that high and tight fastball. And that's the type of hitter he is.
Got one more topic to get to here before we go. Rece Hinds has been going full on Aristides Aquino on the Rockies to begin his big league career. And we had this great view from behind home plate of the homer that he hit off of Tyler Kinley earlier this week, which, hey, if you could give me that view more often or an option to toggle that on and off, I think we've got something going on the broadcast going forward. But Rece Hinds is a really interesting player because that is absurd power that he has. He brings some speed. It's a lot of swing and miss. I think we've rarely seen players with 35+% K rates in the upper levels of the minors come up to the majors and have success. It makes me wonder if Rece Hinds could be a right-handed Joey Gallo, because that's the first player I think of with the high strikeout rate that had a longer big league career than expected since the power was so good, and because Gallo was actually a pretty good defender for a little while too. So I almost wonder if Rece Hinds' path to getting regular opportunities hinges on him being at least good, if not a very good defender somewhere on the field for the Reds.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he has 90 power, but just as fascinating for me, maybe 90 power, 10 hit tool. It's pretty extreme in both directions. So I agree that like things like base running and defense will become important, because that's how, if you look at somebody like Paul DeJong, who had like a 5% walk rate and a 35% strikeout rate, why did he have the career he had? Because he could play defense well at short, and had power. So, but in this case, something that was really fascinating to me was that they even had this viewpoint for us in the first place, because they went to this before the pitch came in. And I don't know if it was just happenstance and they were lucky, but they got this tank. They got this blast, this absolute monster of a home run from behind the plate. And you got to see the pitch coming in, the pitch going out. So Peter Fatty pointed this out to me. He's a professor at Illinois and at Southern Illinois, and also he's a chief science officer at Game Sense Sports. And what they do is train hitters with sort of occlusion. They do things where, like, here's the pitch, it's coming in, and then they black out your glass, and then you black out your view, and you have to like oh, that was a curveball, it was a slider, try to guess location and stuff like that to train hitters to make their decisions faster. So he's obsessed with that viewpoint in particular. And he pointed out that because of Traject, the newfangled hitting machine that's out there, that basically every ballpark has to have that view for every pitch. So somewhere in some database, those exist for every pitch. And he was saying, and I agree with him 100%, I would love to have access to that just because I think we could demonstrate deception so much better. We were just talking about Bobby Miller. We say, can hitters just see him? Is there something about seeing him? Couldn't we study that a little bit better if we had more video from behind home plate and see, can you pick up that ball quicker? I know people for teams have done things where they define how long you can see the ball as an object before release. So sort of milliseconds before release, and that's sort of a deception stat. We could mimic something like that in the public sector if we had that viewpoint. So I guess just a plea to the powers that be, like, I would like to have access. I don't know if I need to see the whole game from these seats. I mean, it is great when you're sitting there, but I don't know if I at home need to see every pitch like this. But I would love to have them available, everywhere.
The one thing about that view was interesting is because I know for a fact that there are additional cameras set up, like cinema style cameras that are trained on the hitter, that are trained on the pitcher, so they can get those like cinematic slow-mo
4K, whatever they
4K
do.
ones. So they do that. This one looked like it was actually a cameraman for the broadcast because he followed the ball. But there is also a camera in most places that is just stationary and stays there. I know the Mets have one, whereas there were some of them, I have highlights where it's just that, and then the camera doesn't move, so it must have been just one that sit there running, no one's operating it, and that's probably what they're getting. But this guy looked like the way it was because there is a guy behind home plate so he can get the home runs going. It was just he happened to be there getting it there and there. He got both. So, but that angle does exist in a stationary way too. But you won't get the following the ball. You'll just get like the swing most of the time. That's what most of it is.
To tie this back to our first segment, one thing that also didn't make it into the story was Corey Schwartz saying, and I swear to God, he said some people are already doing this, that you can use Statcast stats and AI in concert with your cameras to direct your cameras to look in the right places at the right times and be focused in the right places at the right times and do the right angles at the right times. It'd be kind of amazing if this wasn't happenstance at all. And this was the result of crunching the numbers in real time and being like, this is our best view right now. Like,
dynamic camera automation is crazy. If people are doing that, that is crazy.
I mean, that was one part of the future that will be cool also because the old heads, like, there's not much to say about it, like, old school wise. This would just make your life better.
Yeah,
you would just get the best angle at all times.
Yeah, you wouldn't miss stuff as much.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was the result of it, or if we got a peek into the future, or if it was just luck, and we'll see more of this luck in the future as the Statcast stats, go into this dynamic camera stuff. That is part of the future as well.
Hey, if Bally Sports Ohio is using AI that way, that's a better use of AI than me using AI to make birthday cakes for Statcast. These ones courtesy of Google Gemini. These actually look pretty good.
Except for that word, 10 years of...
Also, cool laces. What?
Yeah.
Lace pattern? A little bit off. Bothering the hell out of me, but it's all good.
That's a picture. It's also 10 years of reversion.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to innovation, but it came up with an alien equivalent of the word innovation.
You told AI to spell innovation? That is bold. That is tough. They can barely do 3-letter words.
This is our weekly moment in AI.
I love that. It's fun.
I think those will be used sparingly, given that AI apparently has some major consequences in terms of the resources it hogs. But nevertheless,
next week we'll do Trevor May in a rope hat for the Twins,
or Trevor baking an actual cake. We'll just take a picture of that, and the seams will be right. You'll make the seams correct if you make a baseball.
Probably
cake.
Not, but I'll do my best. I didn't know how to back up my criticism, so maybe I'll back that a little bit.
We're going to go on our way out the door. Reminder to get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/Rates&Barrels. You can read that 10 years of Statcast story that Eno was a part of, plus all the other great content that we have. As I mentioned earlier, hey, the Olympics are coming up. We're covering that among everything else going on around sports right now. You can find Trevor on Twitter at I am Trevor May. Find Eno at Eno Saris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. Shout out to the Live Hive for making the move with us on a Thursday. We'll go live on YouTube each and every Thursday throughout the summer because, hey, people like long weekends, and I like throwing my boat shoes on Friday afternoon and just going for a walk. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.